making it more exciting to watch. Also, the timing is kind of important because when you play a sound effect, if you're doing the extra credit, that sound effect takes a little time. And so you have to make sure that you pause for long enough for that sound effect to play, right? So you may have to have a little extra time in there for those sound effects to really come through. Otherwise, you hear the sound effect, but the game progresses and then it's out of sync. It feels like it's wrong timing. So here we go. I'm going to play. Who knows what's going to happen here, right? So I will throw this thing up. In fact, I don't mind showing you. I can show you my code for main since it's so exciting, right? Play a new game. Player count is 5, max strikes is 5, and sleep seconds are 1. Okay, ignore this update for now. Okay, so I'm going to now run this thing, and if you listen, you'll be able to hear the sound effects. So here we go.
Finish.
Yay!
So I'm no sound effect designer. So I'm no sound effect designer, but at least having something in there makes it fun. You could also have one that every roll, but you kind of want those to be small, right? You don't want everyone to be this long sound. So, you know, having something little that indicates that maybe one roll happened or that a strike happened. And I think I link in the project to some places where I found some fun little files, like Sound Bible and similar. You got to think of clever words to type in, you know, ding, you know, you got to think of like different kinds of ways to express the thing to find the thing you want. You can do things like scream, but then yeah, that's like blood curdling and long, and you just have to be clever at the wording that you type in when you search, and then you can find some things. But yeah, for the small things that happen frequently, a small sound is probably great. A little, you know, bleep, zap. Look for words like that that are very, you know, descriptive, and you'll probably find some fun sounds. You can and like whatever, right? If you want to get really dramatic, there are things like, you know, cannon shots or gunshots, and that seems a little literal for people getting ejected from the game, but you know, it's your game. So whatever sound effects you'd like to have, if you want gunshots and blood curdling screams, I will resist the urge to call the police on you. All right. Anything else that you want to ask about that game right now? Does that give you enough of the flavor of what's going on? All right, what else do you want to ask about in terms of the design of that? What else can we talk about that would help you get started with that? I think we've given you a pretty good start, a pretty good overview here, but we can continue to talk about how that might work or any pieces that you want to chat about now. I don't have a lot more that I want to talk about today, so I was thinking we probably wanted to spend our time on this. So what else, folks? What shall we do that can help you get this figured out and on its way?
Quick question. For game, you had it, the parameter for sleeping the thread as seconds, not milliseconds. Is that what we should do, or is it up to us?
It's up to you, but I think, you know, from the outside world, you might think of it in seconds, but the way that you have to implement is that it is in fact in milliseconds. So I just figured that was probably more of a common thing for the outside world to think of it. If you were setting it in a GUI, I would imagine you'd probably set it in seconds rather than milliseconds. But yeah, it's just the way I thought about it in there. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Right. What else, folks? Everything else is making sense? You think you got a great start to it? You know where you're going to go with all of it? Yep. So yeah, the important thing is here, you're going to have a loop that controls it. And mostly that's just going to be every player, right? The loop is going to be every time a player gets a chance to do something. And then you've got to think about when that happens, right? When that player has a chance, how do I know whether they get to play or not? Because if they have the high, they don't need to roll, right? They just sit back, they pass. And then you have to think about what happens when, right? What happens if I make a roll that's higher than the previous one or ties the previous one? How do you then keep track of who's the winner, right? How do you keep track of how many strikes a player has? Where does that go, right? Where does that go? I think I decided it goes in player, right? So I figured the player can keep track of their own strikes because that's a common thing, right? That players are going to have dings against them at some point. So you've got to decide where that's going to go, how you're going to handle that. Then you also say, look, if they got a strike and then that ejects them from the game, then you got logic to deal with there, right? So it's really one big loop and then a lot of logic inside to handle these conditions about what happens if, right? Yeah, yeah. The places that have a lot of landmines, there's extra credit for doing the remove on the iterator. You'll want to think about that because you definitely can get yourself into some weird situations. And in fact, the remove in general is interesting, right? You have to think about the iterator, the fact that you've got an iterator, and if something gets removed, what does that mean to the iterator, right? And again, remember, when you're removing something, does it matter whether you're removing the thing that's at the front or at the end or somewhere in the middle? Oh, it certainly does, right? It certainly does. And if you've got an iterator that's watching and moving along, right, and sort of paying attention so it can go to each one in turn, what might mess it up? Right? If you remove, does that screw up the iterator because of the thing it was pointing at you just removed, or like what's the story there, right? So definitely the scenarios of removing are definitely interesting, and they will make you think some and get your logic in order. It's also very easy to ball up a bunch of logic and make it interdependent and then figure out later that it doesn't have to be so dependent. But that's something you'll have to do. And again, good testing of your circular linked list, especially that like remove method with all the scenarios and the iterator remove if you decide to do that, right? Even if you don't have the remove in the iterator, you got to be a little bit careful of the remove scenario and what it might do, right? All right. All right, what other questions do you have about the project then? Okay, everybody got a plan of attack. Everybody knows where they, or at least where I'm recommending that you start, which is write your linked list code, make it circular, right? Write your iterator, test the heck out of that thing, right? I personally would say do not move one step forward, even though it's not glamorous work. Don't make one step forward until you have a circular linked list that you believe is golden. In all scenarios, it does the right thing. Remember, when you test that, you don't need to test it with players. You shouldn't test it with players. You should test it with some wrapper type, either strings or integers. You can test this thing without using players, without any involvement from the game. So test, right? This is the place where you really want to do that. Because your game will definitely go off track and get wonky and do wrong stuff if you don't get your circular linked list right. Okay. Player's an easy, straightforward class, right? Doesn't have much to it. Then you can work on the game, and the game logic is the thing that will then take you, some time to really get it settled. And then if you get time, extra credit, put that remove in the iterator and make your sound effects. Then it's kind of fun, right? It's fun to see it all come together in the end. All righty. What other questions here? All right. Cool.